Lisa Jenkins. You've met them a number of times in the past. I just want to encourage you to ask any questions you've got over the course of today's briefing. Feel free to talk during the briefing. The whole idea of this is to provide a high-level overview of some of the changes that we're working through on the regional policy statement. And I think without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sam, who's going to run most of the briefing, and then Lisa's going to talk through the next steps. So over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Andrew. Kia ora, councillors. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. As Andrew's pretty much covered off, the purpose of what we're going to talk about today is a high-level summary of things that have changed since, well, you've now seen those changes, but where it was at the time of Clause 3, when it went out for engagement, and where it's at now. And I'll cover off that first bit, and then towards the end, I'll hand over to Lisa to talk about the next steps. But before we do that, just want to give a really big thanks to the planning team. I'm sure Andrew and Lisa would share the same sentiment that the team has got through a massive amount of work in a very short space of time. And you'll see that if you've looked at the track chains version of where it was at Clause 3 compared to where it is now, like a huge amount of work has gone into resolving all of that feedback that we got from this group, from the table, from Toroputuia, and from all of the feedback we received from that stakeholder engagement as well. And it's not just planning to thank as well, it's science, our science team, our rivers team, GIS comms, everyone's had a huge role to play in this, and the continued support we've had from the Runanga entity planners as well. It's been they've been in it with us all this way. And so now onto those key changes. So this is very high level. There's been lots of minor edits that have gone on as well, and we're continuing to pick those up as we're still reading through things, but these are the main things that have changed. So one of the significant changes is that the mana whenua chapters have been refined and updated in accordance with the feedback that we were receiving from the entity staff. A large effort went into rebalancing the outcomes across the 4 well-beings. So that's not just focusing on environmental, but the social, economic and cultural well-beings as well. And there's an example on this slide, and one of those things was around enabling water storage for security and climate resilience. The principles of Te Mana o Te Wai have also been embedded, and we've tried to provide a more clear line of sight across the objectives and policies that are delivering on rangatiratanga, kaitiakitanga and manakitanga. And that has included the insertion of some extra policies into the coastal environment, energy infrastructure and transport and rural land use and development chapter, some policies that are specifically addressing rangatiratanga, kaitiakitanga and tikanga, which those ones didn't have them before. We also now have a single set of objectives, so we did receive a lot of feedback on the fact that we had 2 sets of objectives at the time of Clause 3, where we had a specific mana whenua suite of objectives and then a separate integrated management suite of objectives. Those mana whenua objectives have been absorbed into the integrated management objectives, but we have still maintained mana whenua outcomes in the mana whenua chapter. So that means that both the original intent has been maintained, but we now have the clarity of line of sight of how those objectives are being implemented through the policies and methods. We've also just generally tried to make the RPS more clear and concise, and the feedback that we received really helped us and enabled us to do that. We've also got more definitions now, including te reo terms in the glossary as well. And we are now no longer seeking to define Māori land in the regional policy statement. It instead provides the direction for that to occur in conversation at a district council level, acknowledging that it is something that needs those more localised conversations across districts and across takiwa. The advice we received was that it was too big a thing to try and tackle at a regional scale. We also now have a new chapter which is specifically addressing rural land use and development. So that, again, that's gone in response to feedback. A lot of that feedback we received at the wānanga we had with Turaputuia. And so that's now providing much more clarity around where there are specific rural package of policies, which are complementary to some of the urban form and development ones as well. But there's now 2 chapters, one for urban and one for rural. And there has also been a handful of extra policies that have gone in which were identified as gaps through that Clause 3 feedback. There's some examples here where there's now specific policies around ports, biosecurity in the coastal environment. Natural hazard resilience works has been given its own space so that it's an easier package to identify. And there's also been a catch-all natural hazards policy for other natural hazards that we don't have specific policies for, which was also identified as a gap. So that's been fixed up. And then, of course, we've also made the changes about those choices that we came to you with around the direction that you wanted to provide us with, and that related to a slightly more enabling avenue for on-site wastewater provisions, still with a lot of constraints, but making sure that there was a pathway there for those situations that needed it. The restrictions on noise sensitive activities close to the airport have been simplified. We've also got greater specificity around achieving Indigenous biodiversity targets, including requiring timeframes to be set for those targets. We've also included timeframes for the long-term visions, which weren't all there at the time of Clause 3. And so there's a range there from 10 to 60 years, depending on the distance to travel and how much is required in terms of getting there. And we've also made the land use suitability policy, which is sitting in the rural land use and development chapter, quite explicitly having that enablement of innovation as part of that, what that policy is trying to deliver. We've also still got a few things in the pipe that we're still working on. The first one on the screen there is an introductory mihi, which we're working with the entity staff to get. They've provided us with the feedback that they're happy to provide that for us, which is awesome. We're
probably worth saying they're working with Liz Brown.
Yeah, and they are working with Liz Brown to do that for us, and we will just take that and slot that in. One of the really important pieces that we're working on is the wiring tables. So those are the relationships between the objectives, policies, and methods. I've got 2 slides coming up on this just to illustrate that, so I'll save that for that one. In terms of the maps, we're trying to be a lot smarter about the way we're using maps. So with this regional policy statement, the maps will be in a GIS format. We're trying to move away from having to maintain both PDF versions and GIS versions because they're constantly always chasing each other's tails, and it becomes very difficult in terms of implementation. So what we are doing there, working really closely with the GIS team, is making sure that the GIS package is the source of truth for those maps. But we do have a couple little tidy ups still to make on the maps. One of those is in relation to highly productive land. We discussed with you around making it visible where land use capability class 3 is, so that we can negotiate the hearings a little bit more easily. That's on its way. Likewise with the Braided River overlay, at the moment they're sitting there as lines, but we are converting those into a polygon, more similar to the highly productive land map, just to make it really clear around where those roles and responsibilities are being delineated. We also need to go through the entire document to put in all of the hyperlinks. That's where we've got in-text references to other policies, embedding those hyperlinks in the document across the board. Likewise, having hyperlinks to the maps. We've also got this Clause 4A version, which is the version that we have at the moment, is currently with Papatipu Runanga to provide feedback, and they've got till the end of the month to provide that feedback, and then we will need to respond to that feedback. It's also concurrently undergoing an external legal review, just to make sure that we are covering off all of our legal requirements and making sure that all of the things we need to give effect to are being given effect to. We have also just recently received back a te reo review, so reviewing across the board everywhere we're using te reo Māori to make sure that we're using it consistently and that our spelling and grammar is all correct. And we just have a little bit of polish to do, so that's just in relation to getting the cover pages in. As a planning team, we're still picking up little things like where commas shouldn't be or where they should be, and all of those little fun edits. So there's still a little bit of that going on, but there's no changes to the direction. It's just that pure small edits for readability or using the correct language. And we are still finalising the Section 32 report because we've needed to wait for the draft, the Clause 4A version to land so that all of the policy references and numbering are correct. And we'll be working to get that Section 32 to you as soon as possible. The last bit from me is in relation to the wiring aspect that I talked about. And I actually find this really exciting because what we're doing behind the scene is we're not just going to be producing tables. In the background, we've been creating a database, which is a knowledge graph, and we're going to build our tables out of this knowledge graph. And what that means is that all of the objectives, policies, methods, and issues are all wired up in the background so that we know exactly which objectives relate to which issues and which policies are implementing those objectives, and likewise with the methods. I've just picked on a small example here, which is just pulling out one objective, which was risks from natural hazards. And what this has done is then pulled out the issues that it's addressing in yellow, and then it's pulled out the policies in orange, which are implementing that objective. It can also do some other cool stuff, like where this has just got a little pop-up window, and it's a bit hard to see on the screen, but what this is demonstrating is it's pulled up 17 policies and 10 issues related to that objective. So we're trying to, again, be a little bit smarter in terms of we don't want to lose sight that we've created this really integrated document and all of the provisions relate to each other. So it's really important to know exactly how they do that. And whilst it's all one big package, all working together like Lego blocks to achieve these objectives, we still want to have that wiring in the background. And at the moment, this is just to produce those tables, which will show which policies relate to which objectives, and we will put those tables into the document. But we're kind of hopeful that in the future, this is something that even the public might be able to use in terms of really understanding how things like a regional policy statement fit together and kind of putting the power back in the hands of the people in terms of being able to use these things as opposed to just consultants and professionals. That's it from me.
Yep, well, I've got Claire first, and then I've got you, Nock, and Jan and Vicky. Yep.
Through you, Chair, thanks. Thanks, Andrew and Sam and Lisa and the rest of the team that have been involved and maybe somewhere else in the building at the moment. Couple of questions, I suppose. I'll start with the two questions and then if I can make my comments. I understand that there might be some changes mooted from Government around the highly productive land subsequent to our last briefing. So we're on the right track there by you doing a bit more work, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor Mackay. So that's what I mentioned specifically in relation to the highly productive land map in terms of capturing that LUC3 component, because what we will have the opportunity to do at the time of hearing is respond to any changes across any of the MPSs, but the by building that into the mapping, it means that as people are submitting on it through consultation, they'll have that information available to them.
It's the follow through from our briefing that we had in Waimakariri. The other question of clarity is around, I've got two versions open here. The rangatiratanga, kaitiakitanga, and whatever the other policies were, they were in each of the domains. And we put recognise and give effect to, and then there's a string of areas which we give effect to. Is that only for Māori land, or do those policies apply right across Canterbury? Because I think that's quite important. There's one of them. Sorry, I've left my bag at home today and my little book of words around this. There is one particularly which feels like it's all-encompassing of Canterbury. The others feel quite focused to issues important to Papatipu Rēnanga across Canterbury.
I think with each of those policies, it sort of depends on the context. So there is one, so for example, there is one around rangatiratanga on Māori land. But I think some of them do need to be broader than Māori land. So like sites of significance, for example, it's not necessarily, those sites don't necessarily exist on Māori land, but there is still a need to provide for the relationship of Māori with those sites of significance.
Maybe I can get that clarity, but my concern is it reads recognising give effect to. And give effect to, in an RMA perspective, is a very high bar that we have to do, and so I'm just a concern. There's one particular one that feels odd, whereas the others I can understand the recognise and give effect to. So maybe if I can put that in. I think three comments really. I think we've done a great job tidying the staff, and this is a far superior version of what we get initially. But me personally, I'm still not comfortable that it's all-encompassing of our, basically, if we think about the four well-being statistics in our community. So I'm still not quite sure that we quite there yet, but very thankful that we've seen the changes. The one that I just will go back to is the vision statement that's been changed. I imagine the intention of that was to try and be more encompassing, but it actually feels to me less encompassing. I just think that that's we've got specifically, we've changed it to a thriving environment as a cornerstone to a natural environment. What is a natural environment? We have working environments, we have urban environments, rural environments.
Yeah. That would have been, I suspect, in response to some Clause 3 feedback.
Sorry, I'm just putting it on the table. Maybe you can change the little thing about that. Because I have had other feedback to me around that vision statement. It feels slightly less strong now than it was. And the other one that's, I have flagged this at the Wānanga, and it just came on here, flagged it again, and people also commented to me around this. And I know that this is a Te Reo word, and so today I know that it's free to, and how this is perceived in another society.
Yeah.
And I talked to Jaleesa, because I think that actually came from Jaleesa initially, and I talked to her again about it, and she explained the idea of reciprocity. Yeah, that's the right word. But it just feels, I don't know, it's a lot of big words, I suppose. For me, it's a lot more.
Yeah. The only time the term is actually used is in that in the chapter explaining those kind of te ao Māori perspectives. So, yeah.
So I accept that
Yeah.
in that chapter, but how I read it or anybody else that was reading it. So just, you can't do anything positive for it, because it is particularly, it's part of our partner's culture, and I respect that, but
Yeah.
how do we just respect the other side and our perspective?
Sure. I would hope that there's enough explanation there that to take that offence out of the term, and it is probably also worth saying we agreed at that wānanga that we wouldn't make changes to that chapter without agreement of the chairs. So the changes that we have made they've all come through via those mandated people. So I guess ECAM planners have been quite hands off with that chapter, I think, is my message there.
Can I just make a suggestion? And I mean, I did have quite a good conversation with Jaleesa around it, and I'm not sure whether she was still involved in that. But it could be just acknowledging the perception or the understanding of that word in Western culture or Pākehā culture or whatever we want in that para, because I know it is important to the Papatupu Runanga or our treaty partner, and I can accept that. But it's just, this is a combined document, and I think we just need to be sensitive to that.
Thanks, Claire. Nope.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Sam, Lisa, Andrew. Do you know, it's been a pretty trying week actually in here, and the final briefing actually today is, which is what's happening now, and it's really positive. And I want to thank you, because I know of all the work that's gone into this, but with you ones leading it, you know, from the front in some ways. But what I feel with this is that, and I too had some questions around whenua Māori and also the interpretation. So I'm glad that, you know, there's there is going to be a glossary of terms and, you know, explanations. And I think that once those kind of words, you know, that probably needs a bit of work on it. But I think the one thing around, you know, the natural world is a really important one too, because the natural world to us is actually about living things occurring in a natural way, meaning that, you know, it hasn't been created by humans or significantly altered by them. And that's ecosystems, you know, weather, climate, and all of that. So that interpretation, I think, about the natural world, as Claire's brought up, is quite important. The other part, yeah, absolutely, about utu. And I suppose the movie didn't do much, you know, for that word in a kind of a non-Māori perspective, because utu means revenge to a lot of people. Whereas to us, you know, it's about, again, balance and justice, you know, because that's part of that utu process. And so I don't know whether we use an alternative word, because we really do need to find some, again, you know, some kind of balance here and words that don't actually create a negative, you know, a negative sort of feeling with tangata tiriti as well. So in saying that, I mean, looking at the process, I think the proof will be in the pudding also, you know, once Te Rōpūtuia actually gets to see it. But I'm not hearing anything untoward about it. I'm glad that you know, the mana whenua kind of representatives that are working with you guys. What do you call them? Sorry? Yeah, the entity planners that have, mandated from the Papatupu, and that's the link that there. But look, overall, I'm really comfortable with this, but I'm kind of hearing. It's good to hear what Claire's saying, for instance, because respecting that kind of side of it, that we have to find that kind of balance, because it's not just for Papatupu Runanga and RPS, it's actually right across the board. So we have to find that. And so, yeah, well done anyway, up to a point. And thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah. Ai tautoko ka mihia ko mihia. I'm just supporting acknowledging you all, Sam, Lisa, Andrew and the team, for the work that you've done. Sam, I'd kind of, I see in the, where is it? The bottom of key changes made, you talked about natural hazards, resilient work and approach to river management, similar to those hui that we've had in the early mornings. So did that go through okay? Was there any challenges for that?
Kia ora, Councillor Crammell. No, that's gone through really well. Right through the process, we've had a really good staff relationship with the Rivers team. So in many ways, they were holding the pen on lots of those bits, and we were just making sure that it was still consistent and with the wider context of the RPS. But yeah, absolutely, that all went through really well.
It's good to hear. Just a question on who will be doing the response to the legal review? I mean, who will be doing the legal review? Sorry.
Wynne Williams has undertaken that review.
Kind of the wiring got me. Sorry, Sam, you kind of got me all kind of wow. I kind of really like that. But I was probably thinking about in a digital world. I mean, because you have the book like Vicky's looking at now, but you'll have the online one, and that'll be the one that with all the hyperlinks and other things. I suppose in the future, is there? I mean, for this is probably for planners, and is there in the future that it's like on an app or something, or just so it's actually usable instead of kind of sitting on the shelf sometimes. Actually, that it's actually user friendly kind of thing. I don't know. Sorry.
You're outlining my dream, Councillor Cramwell. I honestly believe that the only way that you're going to maintain no backlog into the future is to be able to have people being able to apply for a resource consent using an app. I don't believe you're ever going to be able to get on top of the compliance effort that we need to achieve the outcomes that you've established, your strategic direction, without being able to use all of the digital tools. And without a framework that's digitally enabled, we can't do any of that. And I think that if that's a PO that you're putting down in terms of it, I'd like to respond to it, because I think that using good digital tools is the way that we have taxis now that you can get with an app. And I think that local government sometimes is a little bit behind, but there's absolutely no reason to in this resource management space. So I really welcome you continuing to question us about moving forward in that way.
Oh, and then just probably back to you, Claire, and then kind of Councillor Korako has mentioned it already. I use utu all the time in regards to tuna, because it's about reciprocity. If I don't show utu and then make sure tuna get out, how can there be utu reciprocity for them to come back? So that's the way I use utu all the time. I don't know if it's, as Councillor Korako mentioned, is about regarding the movie, and unfortunately, utu is kind of sense in that way. But this is how I use it. An important concept concerned with the maintenance of balance and harmony in relationships between individuals and groups and order within Māori society. So that's what I'm just saying that's what it means to me, and that's how I use it. Kia ora.
And that's the basis of the explanation, basically, in the thing. I guess I grew up with those sorts of words around growing up, and a lot of my generation, probably younger, slightly younger to us.
I mean, one thing maybe Councillor Koraka and myself can use, because you can use tau utu utu, which is a longer version, means the same thing. And then looking at David over in the corner there as well, that's something we could probably, talk to our Runaka people, our mana whenua about. If it means the same, just all it means is go from utu to tau utu utu. Anyway, that's a suggestion. Kia ora.
I think that's a really good suggestion. Yeah, get the concept in there, but just change the word. I think that's a really good idea. So maybe that could be suggested to the entity planners and see if they would accept that change. That'd be good. Thank you, Claire, as well for that. Bring that up. And Vicky.
Yeah, there's so much work in here, I think it's looking really good. With respect to the waste policy, which is on page 92, one thing that I wondered, because I had suggested maybe Waste Mins would be a good organisation to sort of put that, put our document to see, but specifically around that one. And the thing that I don't see in the waste bit, is around waste the distance of travel for waste to go in order to go to whatever facility it is that it needs to go to in order to do the things it needs to do to keep to create, for the hierarchy. Obviously, you need different types of infrastructure to enable those hierarchy outcomes. But the waste travel distance is also a really key part, and also the mode of transport. So, where there's rail option, for example, and I'm not seeing that reflected in here. And I just wonder whether there might be, something from maybe somewhere else in New Zealand or whatever, because that would be good to have a think about. Something that's come up with respect to the cruise ships in particular, but I wonder if this is all ships shipping. It's around the dumping of wastewater at sea from ships. Now, I understand that cruise ships, I think, certainly have treatment plants on board, I believe. I don't know what the mechanisms there are for treatments on, but I did see it was like only a kilometre out that they can then dispose. And I wondered so that's within our boundaries, and I'm just wondering whether there's something in here that could be whether that's something that's actually more relevant to the coastal plan. But that was something that's been raised that I hadn't thought of until now, until just this last week. So, and then in terms of solar rooftop is, I think, a really key thing. And it's, I think that's playing out in other countries as well, like just the criticality of the solar rooftop opportunity. And how much land that can save. And it's not to say it's the silver bullet and that's all we need. It's certainly not. But when we talk about, we've got a policy here on small and community scale renewable. I'm thinking, does small mean smaller than community scale and therefore means like individual rooftop? Or, and I know that's not just solar, it's talking about renewable energy altogether. I can't see anything that sort of really explicitly refers to solar, to ensuring that homes and commercial buildings and the like are built in order to be able to retrofit these things if they're not already, because we're not requiring it to be part of new build at this moment. And I don't know that the districts would necessarily require developments to do it, but at the very least we could try and put something in there to ensure that the thought is given to ensuring they're capable of being retrofitted and that the loads can be taken. So that's a sort of strategic, sort of high level thinking. I think potentially even being able to thinking about retrofit for like toilet flushing with rainwater and some of those things. Again, they're easy to do as a retrofit if it's been set up for that, but not. So I don't know if there's something that we could weave in around, future proofing buildings that are quite cheap fixes that you might not do the whole hog now, but are able to be fitted in later on, and whether there's something that we can weave in along those lines.
Thanks, Vicky. Yeah, I'll come to you, Nick. Yeah. All good? Just going to take that. Yeah. Yep.
It was just conferring with Sam. I think, Vicky, a lot... Sorry, Councillor Southworth. I think a lot of what you're saying there is is things that we really would like to encourage people to do. But I'm nervous in terms of committing to that because I'm not sure we have the evidential basis to require people to do it, because we haven't done the economic analysis of how much does it cost versus the feasibility of it. We haven't done that work. But I think that there's a lot of scope to be able to encourage or consider, as you use the word. And I think we can go that far. But I want to just have an element of caution about moving all the way to requiring.
And I accept that, and I think it is that signalling it. If we can signal it and have it put into the planners' minds who take this stuff and then convert it into district plans and as time goes by, hopefully it will just become the thing. But it's that, where practicable or consider, it's those sorts of things. But at least it's bookmarked in here to give thought and trigger a thought process when the more detailed plans are done.
I might just also say that in amongst the congratulations that Sam was giving earlier to the team, he admitted himself, and this is just one reason why Sam is absolutely brilliant. He's had a look at policy UFDP7 Part E, and if that's on page 123 of the track change version. So again, just note the brilliance of this young man here. It says encouraging the efficient use of water and energy in buildings and infrastructure, including, for example, capturing, storing and recycling water, which gets very close to the point that you were raising, Councillor Southworth.
So maybe just a little something around future-proofing for retrofit where feasible, which is a slightly different thing. It's sort of not having to be done right now. It's perhaps a slight tweak.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Vicky. I've got John and Nick, and I'll come back to you after that. Is it all right, Claire? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really appreciate the work that's been done on this document, and for me it's a lot clearer and brings in a bunch of stuff that I think I guess our wider rural communities were looking for. In saying that, yes, we've got a land use development chapter that is kind of enabling for innovation and the like, and then sort of has a hook about land use capability and soil types. So it's like on the one hand you give us, on the other you take away. And when I'm looking at the FMUs, I guess for each of the FMUs, there's sort of 8 to 10 clauses sitting in there, and then there's one line that talks about the social, economic, and cultural. And I wonder, time you read everything else, what opportunity sits within the economic part of it, and that's the wee bit of a challenge for me. I accept what you're saying, that we are enabling things to happen, but I do get nervous when we have thousands upon thousands of words about what could be done or should be done or can't be done, and then a line that kind of says, but we will enable this. And I'm just wondering how those things balance when it comes to a point of a consents officer or someone looking at and going, so where does that economic development, that rural land innovation and the like sit? So I still have a nervousness while we've improved it, that we don't quite see that overt I guess recognition of what our rural productive sectors kind of bring to the community sitting in within this document. But it is a heck of a lot better than it was. But I still have that nervousness of what does it mean in real terms, given all the stuff that's wrapped around it, whether it be cultural or environmental or whatever.
Thanks, John. I'll go to Nick.
Councillor Southworth, it's Councillor Suckling, sorry, you nearly took the words right out of my mouth there. I mean, team, you have to be congratulated. I mean, you've come a long way in this document, but I am slightly nervous when I do read through the land use thing and the small emphasis on economics. I mean, I know it's not all about money; it's also about the environment. But just could you take that on board, I guess? And just going back to Vicky's comments before about solar energy on roofs. I mean, some of that comes back to our councils too, because the houses, when they're built, have to be strong enough to take these infrastructure, so of solar panels and things like that. So it's I think it's a bit of a joint partnership between us and our local TAs, because and then I know some of the roofing manufacturers won't actually guarantee their product if you put solar panels on them. I know that because I've been through that myself recently, but also can tell you that currently I'll have a 6-year payback, and if the electricity goes up 15%, I'll pay it back in 4.5 years. So,
Additional. Grant.
Oh, just picking up on what John's saying, really, on the rural land use and development section, there is an item there that talks about development and land use achieving long-term visions for FMUs. And I think that leaves it open for more strategic fine-tuning of how the land might be developed. And we've been talking about this the last few days. So it's kind of like a catchment management planning or whatever. So I think that's quite good in there, that it's a little bit flexible at the moment, but it's saying that, there's further work to be done. Just on that chapter, just for clarification, really, that there's the clauses related to rural lifestyle and rural environment or rural residential development, and it says, in the case of Christchurch City, no further rural lifestyle or rural residential development is to be provided for. And then I'm just looking at I'm thinking of the spatial plan. And then under the what's this one, P3, urban development and development requirements, it describes under clause 5 there that require residential greenfield development to achieve residential net density. So is the difference between the two simply in terms of the size of the land holding for a residential greenfield development is a small section as opposed to a 4 hectare or a 2 hectare, so that's all that's about. And thank you very much for this.
Thanks, Grant. Claire.
Thank you. Just sorry. Just regarding solar, there's actually a recent paper coming out, a recent article I read of some. It was from electricity or energy generation, that it's more productive, or you get a better return if you actually invest in movable solar panels that can follow the sun around all day, as in solar farms, rather than putting a whole lot the same investment onto a whole lot of houses. So that's just a piece of work that's just come out relatively recently that people might want to look at. I thought that was really interesting, and maybe I should go back and find it. The other big one that isn't come in, and I can't remember the page number, 73, 43 and something or other, where we have a list of regionally significant infrastructure. We have not put our community irrigation schemes in there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right there. But further on at about page 74, 73 or 75, we actually have some narrative which acknowledges the regionally significant impact of our community irrigation schemes under that specific policy. So, and I know that irrigation companies, that was one of their points, so it doesn't appear to be printed up. I've got 3 different pages that I've pulled out on that one.
Thanks, Claire. Good to raise that. Teams looks like that's making them think about it. Go to Genevieve.
Actually, on the same point, the key changes inferred on your thing does actually relate to that.
Genevieve, just hang on a second. Let's just. Sorry, they're just talking. Just give them a bit of a chance here, just so you get heard. Yep. You's good. Thank you. Sorry, it's all good.
Sorry. Well, it's sort of tacking on to that. It is actually partially talked about in the discussion document regarding it's put into the 4 well-beings relating to irrigation, water storage, security and resilience. So I think that's been mimicked in there somewhere. I'm sorry, I don't have a copy and it's in the other room. And anyway,
Yeah, so I was just discussing that actually, and the enabling water storage, and I was just going back to the clause 3 discussions, and yeah, irrigation companies are requiring over the coming years the ability to store more water. Is there anyone else in that feedback? I couldn't see any, but other than those people or those interested people that require more water storage? I'm just wondering if there's sort of a theme in there somewhere, because I couldn't see it. Because it's discussed at quite a, it's one of the 3 on that particular changes made. And I think, well, if it's a broad picture, then yes, but if it's only one particular interested group, then I'd want to know why it was plucked out for changes. Sorry, that's just my point of view.
So that change came about, yes, in response to some clause 3 feedback, but also in response to some of the discussion that happened in the wānanga prior to going to clause 3. So this council was quite, I mean, that was what Councillor Sunkel was saying, was we got some quite firm direction to put some more balance into the regional policy statement to make sure that that it didn't prevent people from looking after their economic well-being as well as their social, cultural and environmental well-being. So it was not just in response to the clause 3 feedback, it was in response to the guidance of this council as well.
So just the other thing with regards to what Councillor Southworth commented on with regards to discharges in the coastal environment. I'm quite particularly interested in that as well. From what I gather, it's actually less than a kilometre from the heads and the coastline. And the coastal permits to dump waste or other matter, definitely needs to be addressed in here to a degree based on our current environmental plan and policy statement. Yes, so I'm just interested to see if we can somehow really plug that into this document at this stage. Or
Certainly we can have a bit of a think about that, Councillor Robinson. I do think, though, that the mechanism to restrict ships dumping their bilge water or other water within our shore is the coastal plan, not the regional policy statement. So we can signal, but we're in a really fortunate position that we're in the scoping phase of undertaking that. And we didn't get all the way through Devon's presentation, but one of the things that we've been working with Devon on is around how do we take that ecosystem-based approach, understand what the pressures are within the ecosystem, and then find methods and ways of addressing those. And I think that from my side, I've taken on that feedback, but I'd really like to see what the evidence is around that in terms of the consequence, because that helps us in terms of understanding what the right mitigation or change needs to be. Because at the moment, I don't have a good idea. I don't have an evidence base of how far offshore you might need to, if there is any distance that you can dump that bilge water or wastewater from your vessel. We'd need some evidence to understand that, and then we can develop a mitigation to make sure that there are no effects within our coastline from that.
Thanks, Andrew. Hey, thanks, team. We're pretty much at 4:00. It's been a really good discussion. Thanks, councillors, for your really great feedback and great questions. But most of all, to the team at the end of the table there and everyone that's worked on it, thank you so much. You've heard that from councillors today. Smile. No, you've done a really good job. But yeah, Andrew, last say.
I'd like to hand to Lisa just to give you an indication as to what the next steps are. So just that final cut. There's 2 slides left in this briefing.
All good.
And my apologies, that frown was going, I've got 2 more slides.
I think we've read it anyway, but
Yeah.
no, just carry on.
Yeah. So we've got some next steps. I think we can actually probably skip to the next slide. I think I just wanted to just make sure that you're aware of so we've got a briefing set with you on the 20th of November, and in that briefing we'll ask for some guidance on some things. So I know that timeframes for notification has been something that comes up around this table a lot. So it'll be the 20th of November that you kind of get your opportunity to give us the guidance so that we can write the recommendation for the council meeting on the 11th of December. And also in that briefing, we want to just sort of take you through what the resolutions you'll be asked to make will be, and just kind of give you a bit of context around, the what you'll have to have particular regard to, and what your kind of requirements are in making those decisions, so that you've got a good understanding kind of going into that December meeting around what you need to do to tick the boxes.
Cool, thank you. Well done again. I look forward to the next your work, on the Clause 4 stuff that you have to do. And then when we get it back here on the 20th of November, thank you. And the 11th, thank you. Greg, are you all good to do karakia? Oh yeah, I can do it. Ka pai. Oh, kia ora tātou. Nei rā te mihi ki a koutou. Mō koutou mahi I tēnei rā. Ai he karakia whakamutunga o tātou nei rā. Kia tau, nā manakitanga o nā me karo ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Ko mahia te hua mā kihiki, kia toi te reo, kia toi te mana, kia toi te aroha, tūturu whakamaua, kia tīna. Haumi e hui e tā e ki kia ora koutou.